What if, um, what if the medical prescriptions being written today are actually dictated by ancient invisible soul archetypes? To really think about that for a second.
Yeah, it's a pretty staggering thought.
Right. Today, for our deep dive, we're looking at a document that bridges two worlds that, I mean, they almost never speak to each other. On one hand, you have deeply esoteric, ancient metaphysical concepts, and on the other, you have a highly modern biological medical intervention.
It's a completely unique synthesis, honestly. The text is called the Vishnu-Shiva model, Identity, Transformation, and Embodiment. And it attempts to map the functions of the soul directly onto the physical realities of hormone replacement therapy, or HRT.
Which is just wild to even put those two things in the same sentence.
Oh, absolutely. But it's treating the body and the soul not as separate subjects, It treats them as a continuous interactive system.
And what's so fascinating about these sources is that they take these highly charged modern topics like HRT and transgender identity,
Mm.
and they strip away all the modern politics. They look at it purely through this neutral metaphysical lens.
Right.
And I want to be super clear here. That's exactly how we are going to look at it today for you, our listener. Just as a conceptual system, we aren't taking a political or ideological side here.
No, definitely not.
And we certainly aren't here to debate the social aspects of this stuff. We are literally simply unpacking this incredibly specific framework on its own terms just to see how it ticks.
Which is really the only way to understand a text like this. You have to step out of the current cultural arguments and step into the architecture the author has built.
Totally.
It's also important to note that this isn't a piece of formal orthodox religious doctrine. You aren't meant to read this as some strict interpretation of Hinduism.
There's more of a symbolic framework,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. It's using these ancient figures to explore a very specific mechanical question. Basically, how does an immortal, limitless essence interact with a biological, highly restricted physical form?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how that interaction works, we first have to understand the two massive soul archetypes sitting at the very center of this text. We have Vishnu and we have Shiva.
Right. And the document is clear that these aren't just like characters in a myth. They are actual functioning soul-level mechanics.
Okay, so how do they function?
Well, they represent a fundamental polarity in the universe. Let's start with Vishnu. In this framework, the Vishnu archetype represents continuity, coherence, and the stability of identity.
The anchor.
Yes, the anchor. It's the force that holds a structure together and maintains the absolute truth of what something is. Then, standing directly opposite to that, you have the Shiva archetype.
Which is the chaotic one, right?
In a sense, yeah. Shiva represents transformation, dissolution, and necessary evolution. It's the energy of disruption that prevents things from just stagnating.
Whenever we get into abstract polarities like this, I always try to visualize them. So for you listening, imagine a massive ancient tree. Vishnu is that deep, sprawling root system buried in the earth.
I like that.
Yeah, and the roots are entirely focused on keeping the tree stable, grounded, and alive. That's the coherence part. But Shiva is the changing of the seasons.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. Shiva is the shedding of dead leaves in autumn, the harsh freezing over in winter, and then that violent bursting growth of entirely new branches in the spring. You absolutely need those deep roots to survive, but without the changing seasons, the tree never evolves. It just stagnates.
And if we push that tree analogy a bit further, it highlights the tension perfectly. I mean, the roots and the seasons are technically opposing forces, right? But they're entirely complementary. One provides the anchor, the other provides the growth.
Yeah, they need each other.
They do. And the core premise of the text is that these two archetypal functions don't just float around in the cosmos, they actually incarnate. They enter biological human bodies. And that, that is where things get incredibly messy.
Oh, the incarnation problem. Because jumping from an infinite cosmic force into a physical human body isn't exactly a seamless transition.
It's highly traumatic to the archetype, mechanically speaking. When these pure soul-level functions enter biology, they have to develop psychological identity structures just to survive in the world.
Just to function on a daily basis.
Exactly. Suddenly, an infinite essence is subjected to extreme physical limitation, societal conditioning, endless external noise. The text operates on the principle that the soul itself remains entirely constant and perfect, but its expression through the human nervous system and human psychology can become severely distorted.
So the pure roots and the pure seasons are suddenly forced to operate inside a tiny, confused human framework.
Right.
Which brings us to how these two opposing forces interact once they're stuck down here in the physical world. And the text uses a term that I know comes with a lot of pop culture baggage.
Oh, yeah. Twin flames.
Yeah, we really need to clarify that.
We do. We
Yeah.
really have to strip away the internet culture definition of that phrase.
Yeah.
Because the text isn't talking about some toxic, highly dramatic romantic soulmate. It defines a twin flame dynamically as a mechanical pairing.
Okay.
It's two beings whose core functions are fundamentally complementary and who mutually activate each other's essential nature.
So it's less about star-crossed lovers and more about, like, two interlocking gears in a machine.
Precisely. The Vishnu person, who is operating on that root system energy, is intrinsically driven to seek the truth of identity. They are trying to build coherence in a chaotic world.
And the Shiva person.
The Shiva person, driven by the energy of the seasons, is intrinsically driven to disrupt, challenge, and evolve. They are drawn to each other not because of some romance trope, but because of mutual activation.
Let me see if I can distill that down for the listener. Basically, Vishnu provides the stage, and Shiva provides the play.
I love that.
Without Vishnu's stable stage, Shiva's actors just fall into the orchestra pit, and it's pure chaos. But without Shiva's play, Vishnu's stage is just empty, boring wood.
That captures the dynamic beautifully. And this brings us to a massive speed bump in the text when we start talking about identity, because the framework enforces a very strict rule about gender.
Oh, right. This is a big one.
It is. The text explicitly states that the soul, whether Vishnu or Shiva, is not inherently male or female. Gendered embodiment is categorized simply as a layer of expression.
Okay.
It's an external trait, not the essence itself. Form can shift and change, but the core essence does not.
Wait, I really have to push back on this intellectually.
Go for it.
Because if the soul is completely ungendered, and it operates entirely above physical sex, why do biological bodies even matter in this framework? Like, if the soul is so high above it all, couldn't these archetypes just bypass the meat suit entirely? Why care about the body at all?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the text addresses that exact friction. The body matters immensely, not because it is the soul, but because it is the necessary medium.
The medium.
Yeah. Because we exist in a physical dimension, the inner essence has to be expressed outward. You cannot have a purely internal existence while occupying a physical form. The text describes the body as the canvas for the soul's truth.
Oh, okay. So if you're going to paint a masterpiece, you still need a physical canvas to show it to the world. You can't just imagine the painting and expect anyone to see it.
Right, and if the canvas is warped or if it doesn't match the truth of the painter, the expression is blocked. That creates profound suffering and dissonance for the incarnated soul.
And that concept is the perfect bridge to the text's most surprising application. This is where the metaphysical architecture crashes right into modern medical reality. We're talking about hormone replacement therapy.
Yes. The framework defines HRT purely as a biological intervention. It alters physical traits, changes internal chemistry, and reshapes the external form to align the body with an experienced identity.
But, and this is key, it doesn't touch the soul, right?
Exactly. Tying back to the ungendered soul, HRT exists purely at the level of form. It is a tool of the canvas. It does not touch, alter, or change the soul itself.
It's just changing the type of paint on the canvas. But here is the absolute crux of the document. The text outlines something it calls the critical distinction.
Yes, this is so important.
Because human beings have this incredible medical tool to alter their external form, they are prone to making a central catastrophic error about why they are changing.
It defines this as the difference between alignment-based change and compensation-based change. This is the mechanism you really have to grasp to understand the whole model.
Let's break those down.
Sure. So in alignment-based change, the person's inner identity is already clear, secure, and stable. They have done the internal work to know their truth.
Okay.
The external change, the HRT in this case, is utilized simply to express that pre-existing truth outward into the physical world.
So they are just matching the outside to an inside that is already rock solid. What does the text say the result of that is?
Deepened coherence. The Vishnu function of stability strengthens because the truth is finally grounded in reality. And the Shiva function stabilizes because the transformation is integrated and authentic. It's a net positive for the entire spiritual system.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Contrast that with the alternative, compensation-based change.
Right, the exact opposite.
In this scenario, the inner identity is a complete mess. It's unstable, unclear, or driven by trauma. The person doesn't actually know who they are internally, so they grab onto this external physical intervention in a desperate attempt to create an identity from the outside in.
And mechanically speaking, attempting to build an inner core by changing the outer shell always fails in this model. The text states it leads to severe fragmentation.
It shatters things.
Yeah, the Vishnu function shatters because there is no true anchor, and the Shiva function becomes chaotic, constantly shifting and transforming just for the sake of escaping an empty center.
You know, to take it out of the heavy medical context for a second, it reminds me of a very human trap we all fall into. Have you ever gone through a really stressful period, felt totally lost, and decided the solution was to buy a ridiculously expensive, completely out-of-character leather jacket?
Oh, absolutely. The classic midlife crisis purchase.
Exactly. You put it on, hoping it's going to generate this cool, confident new personality for you. But really, you're just wearing a costume because you're terrified you don't actually have a personality at the moment.
That's a very relatable way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's the difference between tailoring a suit and wearing a costume.
Well, that's good.
Alignment-based change is going to a tailor. You know your exact measurements, they are undeniable, and you are just altering the fabric so it fits the reality of your body. You feel coherent.
While compensation-based change is...
It's putting on an elaborate theatrical costume to convince everyone, especially yourself, that you are someone else entirely.
And the framework insists the outer can never successfully overwrite the inner. You can't fake the measurements. So let's apply this critical distinction to the dynamic we established earlier. What happens if this massive external change HRT happens within that twin flame pairing?
This is where the ripple effect happens.
Right. Specifically, what if the Vishnu person, the stable root system, decides to transition? It's going to send absolute shockwaves through the dynamic.
It's an unavoidable ripple effect, yeah. First, you look at the impact on Vishnu. If their transition is aligned, if they are tailoring the suit, their inner identity grounds itself. The body finally reflects the truth, and their function as the anchor is fulfilled.
But if it's not aligned?
If it's misaligned, if they are putting on a costume to run away from themselves, their identity fragments, and their connection to their own essence weakens significantly.
And because they are intrinsically, mechanically locked into the Shiva person, Shiva is going to react. I mean, a physical transition is a massive transformation event, so Shiva is immediately activated.
The text outlines 3 very strict outcomes for Shiva's reaction. The first is integration. Shiva recognizes the truth of the aligned transition, supports it, and the bond between the two actually deepens because the system has evolved.
Okay, that's the best case scenario. What's the second?
The second is instability. Shiva detects something is off, intensifies the disruption, and temporary heavy conflict arises as Shiva tries to shake the truth loose.
And the third?
The third is separation. Integration entirely fails, the illusion is too deep, and the bond dissolves completely.
No, hold on. This is where I really need to push back on the logic of the framework.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Well, if Shiva is the literal agent of chaos, transformation, and dissolution, wouldn't a chaotic, compensation-based transition actually be exactly what Shiva wants? Like if Vishnu is just wildly throwing on costumes and destabilizing everything, shouldn't the energy of chaos love that? Why does it cause permanent separation?
I see what you mean. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how the archetypes function, we see that Shiva is not the energy of meaningless chaos. Shiva is the energy of evolution.
Oh, I see.
Evolution implies moving toward a higher, more integrated truth. Shiva has this mechanical truth sense. It recognizes when a transformation is a genuine shedding of dead leaves versus when it's just a regression into hiding.
So Shiva destroys to make room for something better, but a costume isn't better.
Exactly. If Vishnu, who is supposed to be the anchor of the entire dynamic, loses their coherence by faking a transformation, Shiva suddenly has no stage to play on. An ungrounded Shiva becomes purely destructive. They will cause immense friction to try and force Vishnu back to reality. But if the illusion holds, the mutual activation of truth dies, and Shiva simply separates.
That is such a vital distinction. Shiva isn't rejecting the physical transition itself. Shiva is rejecting the lack of truth driving it. Which leads us to the ultimate question this document tackles.
The big one.
Right. If changing the biological canvas is this spiritually potent, what happens if both people in the dynamic decide to transition? We live in a world that loves external markers. It's so tempting to think, well, if my partner and I take the exact same hormones, go through the exact same medical steps, and get matching physical results, we are perfectly mirrored. It must be destiny. Does a double transition act as a magic bullet for connection?
The text answers that with an emphatic no.
Just a hard no.
A hard no. There is absolutely no verifiable system in this model that confirms mirrored physical actions equal a mapped-out spiritual destiny. Both people transitioning does not guarantee your union, and it certainly does not guarantee alignment.
The document actually calls it a totally neutral event. It says a shared transition can be a path to alignment, sure, but it can also just be physically parallel while spiritually distant. Or worse, it can be a source of compounded fragmentation if they are both just compensating.
This raises an important question about how actual metaphysical reconnection works in this framework. It completely dismantles the human obsession with matching bodies.
We really do obsess over that.
We do. But reconnection doesn't come from looking alike or going through the same medical procedures. Two people can undergo identical transitions and still be entirely out of sync with themselves and each other.
So what does this all mean? If it's not matching physical actions, what is the actual mechanism that brings these two forces back together in a healthy way?
The real mechanism requires rigorous, often invisible internal work. Reconnection only happens when both individuals become internally coherent on their own while remaining open to the other's fundamental nature.
Meaning, Vishnu has to find their actual unshakable root truth and stabilize it internally completely, regardless of what their physical body looks like at any given moment.
Yes. And Shiva has to learn how to facilitate transformation and evolve the system without burning the entire tree down. They have to change the seasons while respecting the roots.
That's a delicate balance.
Very. But when both of those internal alignments happen, the text argues the connection becomes clear, direct, and incredibly powerful. The physical forms they happen to be wearing are almost secondary to that internal lock-in.
It really all comes back to a single profound synthesis regarding the inner world versus the outer world. Let's recap the primary takeaways from this deep dive for you, our listener, because there's a lot to chew on here.
There really is.
In this highly specific Vishnu-Shiva model, the soul is totally untouched by medical processes. Gender and physical sex are viewed simply as layers of expression, the paint on a canvas. External change, even something as profound as HRT, is mechanically neutral.
Right, it's neutral.
It is your internal alignment, your honest internal truth, that determines whether a physical change leads to deep coherence or just fragmented chaos. And ultimately, shared physical actions with someone else do not guarantee any sort of real spiritual connection.
The document manages to distill all this complexity down into one very stark, very powerful closing principle. It states, "The outer does not create the inner. The outer reveals whether the inner is true."
The outer reveals whether the inner is true. I really want you to think about that in the context of your own life, even outside the realm of medical transitions.
Yeah.
How often do you rely on changing your external scenery to try and magically fix a deep internal confusion?
Right, like moving away to solve your problem.
Exactly. How often do you change jobs, move to a new city, or completely overhaul your friend group, hoping that a new external costume will automatically generate a stable internal identity?
It's the ultimate human trap. It is always, always easier to repaint the house than to fix a cracked foundation.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, something that builds on the rules of this metaphysical framework. If our outer changes, our bodies, our careers, our lives, are meant to be the canvas that simply reveals our inner truths, what happens when a person's environment fundamentally restricts them from ever painting on that canvas? What if society or family or biology simply won't allow the outer change to happen? Does that inner truth just safely compress under the pressure, waiting for a better day? Or does it eventually force a completely different, perhaps invisible and entirely explosive kind of transformation? It makes you wonder, if you spend your whole life obsessing over the map of the surface, how long until you're completely blindsided by the tectonic plates shifting underneath?